tonight I'm kind of going to recap what it looks like, I think, to start a successful company. Over the last 2 years, I've been studying these startup things and applying these same principles to my business. And I wish I would have learned this in the dorm room. So basically, topic of the night is rethinking the startup process. How to avoid the 90% startup failure rate by Bill Svoboda. I had to put that on there. If we all got on a bus and the bus driver said, guys, there's a 90% chance we're gonna crash today, how many of us would literally want to stay on that bus? I bet a good amount of us would get off of that bus. But for some reason, people in this room think, I'm gonna get on that bus and I'm gonna be that 10% that makes it. But when we have a 90% failure rate in startups, there's something massively wrong with how we're doing this startup. For me and my business, it seemed like it was going good in the dorm room, but I'll tell you, we hit the bump hard because we didn't build this thing on a solid platform when we started. So tonight we're gonna kind of go into that. Before we do though, I'm gonna show you guys a picture. In February, I had a huge accident and I broke my arm. It was horrible. Right here, everything snapped straight backwards. I was going up for a layup in basketball, got fouled, hit the ground, and my arm snapped, like literally horrible. I used to show the picture of what it looked like on the ground. I won't do that anymore because people didn't like that.
Thanks for that, Phil.
Yeah, you can thank me later when you see this picture. This one's bad enough. This is the x-ray. You can see like, boom, there's the crack. It was all shattered. I was waiting on the ground for 20 minutes for the EMTs to get there. They didn't even know what to do when they got there. And they looked at my arm and said, this thing is messed up. This thing is messed up. And I thought, I can't even find my arm. I don't know how messed up it is, but I'll take your word. So the doctor for the next week and a half thought maybe this thing would heal. And he thought, okay, this thing will heal. But as we went back in for the x-ray, we found out that it was actually just healing on a curve. And it wasn't going to be a good arm 50 years from now. So the doctor looked at me, he said, how old are you? I said 28, and he said, let's just do surgery. Let's just get this thing done with, let's start over. And I said, okay, fine, let's do it. So now, in my arm here, I got this metal rod, as you can see. We got 7 screws holding it all together straight. And you might say, Bill, what in the world does this have to do with startups and small business? This is a conference here. Don't share your personal. But here's the point. Here's the point. Just like my arm was messed up there before and people thought, this is going to heal naturally, this thing could heal, there had to come a point where we looked at it and said, we need to start this thing over and get some help into this. And tonight, I'm going to share with you guys kind of the process that I think for starting a business. If you guys follow this, it's just like this. It's going to put this metal rod in your arm, or figuratively in your business. It's going to give you that backbone, that stable rock that you can build your business on. So, as we go on here, I'd like to just tell you tonight's stuff. I'm going to be talking these 4 books. A lot of the things I talk about are from these 4 books. 4 Steps to the Epiphany, Crossing the Chasm, The Lean Startup, which just came out, #2 on New York Times, and The Business Model Generation. Pretty much all 4 books should be in your catalog right now. And the 5th one, which I've been working on, is I Am the Boss. And I don't know if that's going to be the name. Figuratively, right now it is. But that's my book coming out in 2012. Been working on it for 2 years, written at a 5th grade reading level, illustrated with a Sharpie. You'll get through it in a half hour. It's equivalent to reading all 4 of those books. Take my word. Start off with, I just want to ask the question, how do you define a startup? What do you look at as a startup? Because there's a lot of notions about what a startup is. And if you're in this room and you own a business right now, at one point you would classify yourself as a startup. Let's say though, you're thinking of starting a business. What does a startup look like? And I'm just going to throw out some ideas that a lot of people think what a startup is. I'm going to kind of throw that out there. Startups, a lot of times, people think are just a small version of a big company. We go to business school, we learn how 3M does something, we learn how Target or Kohl's, you name big company, Walmart, we learn how they do it, and we say, okay, we'll apply that to a small business. We're going to do this thing. Or some people might define a startup as, okay, I have an idea, let's do this thing. I have an idea to sell whatever it is. Let's get a site up and let's start building this thing. Other people might define a startup as just themselves in their garage with an idea of building something. There's a lot of ideas about what a startup is. Tonight though, as we go into this, I just want to classify what I think a startup is. And just for the rest of this conversation, so we have this clear idea as a frame of reference for what a startup is. A startup is a temporary organization that's searching for a sustainable and scalable business model. not a smaller version of a big company. I'll tell you why it's not a smaller version of a big company, basically like this. Think of a big company. They know who their customers are, they know what they're selling, and they know how they're gonna make money. A startup, if you're starting a business, you have no idea probably who your customers really are. You have an idea of it, but you don't really know what they want either, and you're hoping that they sell it and that you have a business at the end of the day. So a startup, if we look at this, it's a temporary organization searching for a sustainable, meaning that this thing can work in the long run, and a scalable business model. Not just something that we hash up in our head and just start doing. So for the rest of the conversation, that's kind of where we're going to build off of this. And the typical startup motto is fail early, fail often. I think, how many of you have heard that? The fail early, fail often idea. And it makes sense, I think. You know, fail early while you're young, fail often so you learn, so one day you get it right. I think a greatest story of that is Tom's. How many of you guys know the Tom story? Tom, it's a great one. You got a few. Tom, I don't know, what's his real name, Steve? Blake came out with Tom's, but that was not his first startup. That was like number 3, 4, I forget what number it was, but he failed early, failed often. So we have these stories in our head of what fail early, fail often is, but I'd like to ask you, with fail early, fail often, what's the real problem with this? If we're looking at startups, most startups fail because they don't have enough customers, not because their product or service is not good enough. And they only find out this fact after they spent a lot of time and money. So fail early, fail often in a real startup happens a year, 2 years, 3 years after you start, when you realize we've been spending money following our business plan, but you know what? We don't have sales coming in. What in the world do we do? So the question that I'd like to ask is, why do we put all of our time into building a business, the best product or service that no one really wants to buy? And I think the answer is because basically we've all been trained in a way to follow this one path towards building a business. And this is the typical path. It all starts here with the entrepreneur and his idea. The next thing you're taught is, let's write a business plan, let's get this thing on paper. And between the idea and the business plan, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. They teach you, hey, go online, research the market. How big is this thing? What are you going to build? Do people actually want this? What are your thoughts on this? Everything in this process between step 1 and 2 is the owner's hypothesis. But we all know hypothesis is just a fancy word for the owner's guesses. But somehow, the rest of the business goes right based on that business plan, which are just whatever that owner thinks in his head and puts into that plan. Third step is they build it, alpha, beta test. They bring in people to go, hey, what do you think of this thing I built? Does it work? And they go, yeah, it works great. And they go, what do you think of it? Is it cool? Yeah, it's cool, it's cool. They reaffirm it. Number 5, ship it. Ship it, let's get it out the door, because in the business plan, we said we need to have X amount of sales on X date, ship date, and that way we can pay back our investors. Well, this whole process is basically great when we look at idea of business plan, build it, ship it, with the hopes of the money. But when you fail in this process, it's huge. Because you've spent a year, 2 years building this business based on your assumptions, your ideas, only to find out at the end that this thing does not have wings, it doesn't really work. Because why? It was based on our assumptions instead of really what customers demanded. So, this is kind of the process that I've been developing for the last 2 years. I've been following it in my t-shirt business and in this new startup. I'd like to walk through it with you guys tonight. And if you look at this, it's 5 steps here. But it basically is going to contradict everything that we talked about before, because it's going to take your assumptions as the owner. And I don't want you to think that if you currently have a business that you can't apply this. This process can apply to a current business or a startup. But starts with the idea, just like before. The second step then is form a crush club. I'm going to talk about what a crush club is. But basically what we're trying to do in this process is search to replace the owner's assumptions with facts. Because the end goal here is writing our business plan and actually starting this business. So, the first thing we're going to do in this plan is define the need. What need do you believe that your business or product meets? And we're going to create a list of assumptions or hypothesis statements about it. So if we go back here, we look, the idea. That idea is great. You guys all have an idea. Some of you have an idea, Jane, you have a coffee shop. That's your idea, I'm going to create this coffee shop. Other people have an idea for their business. It's all based right here, but in this Crush Club idea, what we're going to do is we're going to put all of our thoughts on paper and say, here's why I think we should have this business. Here's the big need in this neighborhood. Here's the big need in this industry, whatever it is. Then the second step we're going to do is form what I call a Crush Club. And basically, this is a process of getting the owner out the door, out of their office, and in front of a customer to hear feedback. So here's business owner Bob. He's listening to all these people saying, here's what we think. And he's going, interesting. It's a different concept because he's actually getting out and not just taking his idea in his head and putting it into a business plan. He's actually going to sit in front of customers and say, what do you think of this idea? Is this need real? I like to say a Crush Club. When I say Crush Club, it's basically like this. You invite somebody out for coffee. You say, Simon, I got an idea. You're an attorney. I have an idea. I recognize a lot of attorneys have this need in their life. I've talked to a few of them. Can I buy you a cup of coffee because I have this new business idea? Sure, Simon? Yeah, he'll say sure. When I take Simon out for a cup of coffee, Simon has 20 minutes to a half hour, maybe up to an hour with me, if I'm lucky. And in that time, I can tell him what I think my need is, down here. We go over the idea. We form our Crush Club, and by the end of that meeting, if I really have a good idea here, if I have a need, and my business solution is good, Simon is going to have a crush on my business. And he's going to say, Bill, please build that because I need that in my business. I need this. I need what you want to build me. So if we look at this, this guy, all he's really doing is listening to what these people say. A lot of people ask me, they say, how do you start a Crush Club? What do you do? You know, how do you get the first person in front of you to actually buy him coffee? I like thinking like this. A Crush Club is simple. Think of your first sphere of influence. Think of who do you know that has the problem that you're trying to solve. And basically, a Crush Club could start as simply as this. In my real estate business that we're working on, I put in my Facebook profile. I said in the next 20 days, I want to meet with 20 real estate agents to buy them a cup of coffee and tell them an idea I have for the real estate business. And I had Facebook messages like crazy, Facebook profile updates, people going, hey, my cousin's a real estate agent, buy him coffee, here's their info. It was unreal, so I had the opportunity to sit down in front of who I thought my business was actually going to serve, buy them a cup of coffee, tell them, what do you think of this idea here? Is this good? Would you buy this? By the end of that meeting, I know if my idea is good, if they have a crush on it, if it's going to meet their need, if they're willing to buy it, and if they're actually behind it. And I can also ask them, do you know anybody else that I should talk to? If it meets their big need, they're more than likely to tell me, yeah, you need to talk to this person. I have an example in my t-shirt business. We've been working on this system to actually revolutionize the way people order shirts online. Right now, if you order shirts, you have to put in your sizes. You order like 100 shirts. You collect all the money from people. Think of me back in the dorm. I had to collect money from 25 people, pay it all on my card, send the money in, collect the shirts, give them out. What we're working on is a system where instead of one person ordering 25, 100, 500 shirts, they start their order, we make a web page for them, all the students go right there, select their own size, and pay with their own credit card. To get this model though, we followed the Crush Club idea, met with 14 different schools, 24 different people to actually hear how each different school would want this to work. And at the end of it, I was able to spec it out with 15 different web firms and find the one company that we went with. And saved a ton of money. And the web company I finally picked was blown away by how much research I had done. They'd never seen this before. And you feel confident enough in that situation when you have 14 schools going, I want this, that you can actually go, okay, let's move forward with this process to develop what I call your MVP doc, your minimum viable product.